What would The Economist or The New Yorker of hip hop look like? What would it be about?
Hi, and welcome to my living room, the place where I read all of my magazines. My name is Fiona, and I'm a huge indie magazine fan. I'm also a writer and editor working in the spheres of fashion and beauty. Anyways, welcome to Touch Some Mags, the series where I introduce you, my beloved listener, to one indie magazine and one indie magazine maker per episode. Today, I want to introduce you to Get Familiar magazine, created by editor-in-chief Arjun Chadha. For this video, I spoke to Arjun about the magazine, its values, and the ideas behind it, and you'll hear parts of that interview throughout this episode. For the length's sake of this video, I had to cut parts of our conversation out, but if you want to read the full interview, you can find it on my Substack under Fiona Visiona. So what do De La Soul, Yaya Bey, and Sampha have in common? Right. They've all been featured in the latest issue of Get Familiar magazine, and the list of incredible interview partners of Arjun continues throughout the history of Get Familiar. And a quick side note, some of the previous issues are, lucky for you, not yet sold out, so you can still get your hands on some of them. And yes, there is a pun in there about the name of this channel and me just having said that. Let's put that aside. Anyways, Get Familiar is all about depth, passion, and long-form storytelling. It's about hip-hop music, yes, of course, but it's also about hip-hop culture. The magazine features painters, writers, singers, rappers, saxophone players, bassists, and many more. And the best part, there are always women featured on the covers.
I always want a woman on the cover. I don't want to reinforce the stereotype of it being a male-dominated scene. I say reinforce the stereotype is because it's an idea that a lot of people have, which is quite frankly just not true. I've just finished issue 7, or I've sent it to the printer today, and I don't struggle with thinking of female names to put in there at all. I never have, and I find it really important to let it be known that it's not, we did a female cover for Black History Month, or we did a female cover for International Women's Day. No. I can do this without thinking. Editorially, I can easily do it without thinking. It's another thing whether those people are available, whether they want to talk to me, that's a whole different discussion.
So yes, the coolest hip-hop magazine isn't only about songs or music. Get Familiar doesn't ask the regular questions. And that's probably why so many artists believe and themselves read this magazine. It gives them space to speak beyond the music, to reveal more, to open doors. It's one-of-a-kind framework for conversations about hip-hop at large. What I love about this magazine is that, as readers, we're invited to think about music, and especially hip-hop culture, from entirely different perspectives. For Arjun, this was something that he himself had been missing in hip-hop journalism. So it became his personal mission to create the kind of coverage he himself had always been longing for.
I don't have a background in any of this. That's probably helpful to know for anyone watching. So I have no background in journalism, in printed media. I also don't have a background in the professional world of music. So I don't have a Rolodex connecting me to labels or artists or stuff like that. I think that is probably the most important thing to know. You can do this stuff without having any background in it. It also makes it a lot of fun. Get Familiar magazine was started in 2019, I think. That's when the first issue came out. The trajectory started 2 years before that. It was literally me looking for a place where hip-hop's cultural influence was celebrated as much as its music. The way I always put it is, it seemed like everyone was singing along to Kendrick Lamar, but no one was listening to what he had to say. And it isn't necessarily Kendrick Lamar that I'm talking about. It's just an example of what I meant. To me, hip hop is obviously music, but that to me is a very small slither of it. But to me, it's also journalism. To me, it's also filmmaking. To me, it's also photography. To me, it's also literature. It's about cultural critique. It's about so many different things to me. And so I faced a situation where I really love long-form journalism. And I was like, why can't I find something where those two worlds not necessarily collide, but coexist? Why can't hip hop be treated seriously at a journalistic level where it's kind of thought-provoking and it's open to everyone, and it isn't necessarily about the music. It literally just looks at a real broad scope of things. And I just couldn't find it. I literally spent like a year trying to figure out, can I pay someone? Can I subscribe somewhere? Like, I'm happy to donate some money. And I couldn't find it anywhere. About a couple of years before that, so around 2012, 13, I was introduced to the world of independent print, and not as someone going to a conference or something, just as a fan. I used to go to magazine stores. I used to pick stuff up. Those two ideas connected in my head. So I was like, okay, cool. You can do independent print and you can focus that on long form journalism that's multidisciplinary, where music isn't necessarily the central thing you focus on. That's the birth of the idea. It got there very slowly. There wasn't a eureka moment. There wasn't like, that's what I'm going to do. There was this very gradual movement towards me thinking like, oh, wait, you can combine those things. Okay, what would a magazine look like? What would it be about? Then I literally used to go every week to Atheneum in Amsterdam, which is like a massive magazine store. And I used to go there to just buy magazines, even the ones I didn't like, just the ones that sold well or did well or I saw in a lot of people's hands. It's like, what are all these magazines about? And then I had this Excel sheet on my old laptop, which literally broke down every magazine that I held. So it was, how many pages is it? How many pages are text? How many pages are advertising? Just to wrap my head around the basics of what a magazine is. Like I said, I don't have a background in this. I was figuring it out and I populated an Excel sheet for a really long time. I still have that stack somewhere lying around. And you'll see in like the margins, I'll write notes. I'll be like, too much white space in the design. Question is good, but it's too roundabout. Just really simple stuff, just trying to understand on the one hand what a magazine is, but on the other hand also what journalism is. What's a good question? When is it a good question? What's a good answer? What constitutes a good answer and what constitutes a less good answer? And then it's like a really progressive, slow movement towards me figuring out what it was. And then at one point, I reached out to a couple of journalists. Again, I didn't have a Rolodex, cold mailing them. And one journalist, Van Stapelen, who's a Dutch OG pop music critic, he actually was like, yeah, cool, I'll sit with you. Went up and down a couple of times, talked to him. He lives in Den Haag, I live in Amsterdam. I'd go towards him, pay for coffee. The core question I had for him is, this is my idea, do you think it's cool? I do. And he was like, I think it's interesting. Two main questions he had is, why isn't it a website? Why do you want it to be a physical magazine? And also, I understand what you're saying. I've met you a couple of times now. I know what you're about. So I can feel what it is you're going for. But it'd be really helpful to write it down on paper. There should be a document somewhere that just has the entire blueprint of the magazine laid out in 2-3 pages. What is it? What does it do? What does it write about? What doesn't it write about? How does it interview? Literally the nitty gritty. At first I was like, why do I have to like make a manifesto before I've even started? But then I just took my time in doing it. I think it took me like 6 months to make the document. It was, in the end, it was only like 2.5 pages long. But it takes really long time to crystallize these type of decisions. The Economist, The New Yorker, a big influence on me. And so it's kind of me melting those worlds together. What would The Economist or The New Yorker of hip hop look like? What would it be about? That's basically the ongoing experiment that Get Familiar is.
Arjun actively challenges the hip hop media landscape and especially the way hip hop journalism has traditionally been conducted. Each issue follows a distinct theme and approaches hip hop from multiple angles. And 6 years later, Arjun has published almost 7 magazines, with the next issue coming out in January 2026. Get Familiar is cool, it's laid back, it's intentional. Arjun wants you to get familiar with hip-hop, and in that, it is a great name.
The name was a last-minute call. The last thing I decided on, I had a list of, I think, 10 or 15 names I couldn't choose, and I landed on, I didn't even think about it to the extent you were thinking about it. Honestly, people come up to me like, oh, it's a really cool name because it is about getting familiar. Like, I wish I'd thought of that when I chose it. I just literally just went, okay, this is 2 words, it's simple, a statement, it's cool, like I'm good with that. And I just moved on. I still don't even have a logo. I remember when I was making issue 1, I said, cool, I'll figure this out later. This is the least important part of the whole project. Like, the important part is interviewing people, finding a way to get in contact with them, having a good interview, and then making it contextually relevant to everyone. And that's it. That was my goal. I think building a publication with journalistic integrity, a thoughtfulness that can't be found elsewhere, with a depth that can't be found elsewhere, that to me, it's still my biggest driver. I've reached the point where I'm enjoying the fact that I don't have a standard logo and that I don't have a standard typeface. I'm like, how crazy can we go?
Physically, the magazine is saddle-stitched, similar to Arjun's inspiration like The Economist or The New Yorker. For Arjun, it is important to not create a coffee table book, but a magazine that can be easily picked up, flicked through, and most importantly, read. The saddle stitch also gives him the freedom to have the magazines be thicker if need be, say if the contents or the words need more space. What's interesting about Get Familiar is that there is no fixed visual identity, there is no cohesive brand book, because the brand is the quality of the text. The graphic design and color palette change with every issue. Even Get Familiar is written differently every time. The format and the saddle stitch are what stay. And the vibe and the taste in the curation of the artists.
So the decision to not do photography is financial. It costs a lot of money. As much as I love good photographers and as much as I appreciate tremendously what they do, I don't have the budget for it. And understanding that I finance this magazine myself, it's very important in understanding how the magazine moves and what decisions it makes. Aesthetics are really important. Imagery is really important, but it's at the grace of the person I'm speaking to. If I want to share my love for hip hop with everyone, it really means everyone. It really means the people that are also maybe a bit allergic to hip hop, or maybe like, it's not my thing. It's not that I'm trying to convince them, but I am convinced that the contents of these magazines are interesting for anyone that's even slightly culturally inclined. So if you go to a museum once a week, or maybe once a month, or maybe once every 2 months, that to me is enough reason for you to buy the magazine. It should fall in line with what you're interested in. And it has a lot to do with the fact that not only are the interviews self-contextualizing, but it's theme-driven. So every issue has a very specific theme that it tries to address. 2 issues ago, it was what hip-hop could learn from the institutionalization of jazz, and in a broader sense, what happens to non-white creative voices when they come into contact with predominantly white institutions. Super specific theme, but if I pitch it like that, then a lot of people would be culturally curious. I never want the magazine to look and feel the same. It's for this reason. It's because I wanted to appeal to a really broad audience. So I took away that little tagline I had about the footprint of hip-hop. Almost instantaneously took it off. Issue 2, it disappears and it never comes back again. I was just like, people are not gonna pick it up to see the word hip hop. What I want is that you see the cover, you go, that's interesting cover. I'll pick it up and flick through it. I need every issue to fight almost all your intuition at all moments. So the paper changes, the fonts and the typefaces change every time, the layout changes every time. There's no consistency. The only consistency is the dimensions. Even the masthead, like the cover, changes every single time the way I write Get Familiar. Which, mind you, a lot of magazine editors were like, are you sure you want to do this? Because a lot of the recognition of a magazine, of Vogue, is in its paper and in its appeal on its cover. And I'm like, no, but I want to push what you think hip hop is about. I want to push on the idea of what a hip hop fan thinks hip hop is about. And I want to push on the idea of what a photography fan or a cultural critic or someone who likes literature thinks hip hop is about. I want it to speak to them as well aesthetically so that they're open enough. So the design is very much informed by that principle. Have it kind of be subversive on a lot of fronts. Have it not beat your expectations, but swing left on your expectations. Every time you expect something to turn right, to turn left, and to be like, oh, okay, a hip hop magazine is also this. I never considered that a playwright, Rada Blank, is also hip hop. Or I never considered that an artist like the issue you're holding with Caroline Kent, the first interview, is an artist that has nothing to do with music. But she lays the foundation in the theme that's about artistry and artistic freedom. But I want all of that to kind of appeal to you. I want that to, I want someone who likes art to flick through it and be like, sure, I'll read it. And they buy it, they read it. And then afterwards they go, oh, wait, this was a hip hop magazine.
Get Familiar is a reminder that indie magazines can slow things down. They can ask better questions and they can create space for the conversations that don't fit into fast or commercial media cycles. In Get Familiar, we find conversations that don't advertise, but rather philosophize. For me, Get Familiar is about care and passion. It's care in research, care in listening, and care in giving artists the space they rarely get elsewhere but in their art themselves. One last thing I want to add. Throughout our conversation, Arjun told me that he gave himself 10 years before he would allow himself to question the continuance of his magazine. 10 years before he would allow himself to doubt or to ponder on stopping. And that is something that truly inspired me for my own journey with this YouTube channel. He said that if other magazines took multiple decades to become who they are today, why wouldn't he allow himself the same grace? So that's just something to think about, as I will be trying to do the same for me with this channel. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to my second episode of Touch Some Mags. And also, on that note, please get out of my living room. You've been here long enough. See you soon.